Welcome to the IoT Podcast, the home of IoT talks and tales. I'm your host this week, Tom White. Tune in every Monday as we're joined by the biggest names in IoT to unravel the trends, misconceptions and predictions for the Internet of Things. Make sure you're subscribed and press the notification bell so you're never out of the loop. Hi guys, before we get into the episode today, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Akenza.io. Akenza.io are a self-service IoT platform allowing you to build great IoT products and services with real value. Welcome back to the IoT Podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris and Julian from Intertrust. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thanks Tom.
So really looking forward to this. We did our discovery call just a week ago today, actually, which feels like quite a short period of time before discovery and the podcast. And I was really interested due to some of the links that I had with video customers, right, that you guys do. In the past, we spoke about that on discovery. So really interested to get into it and learn more about your business and what you guys do. So without further ado, perhaps we can kick off and kind of understand a little bit about your background and what brought you guys into the world of IoT. And maybe we could start with you, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Chris Kalima. I'm the VP of Product Management here at Intertrust. I'm responsible for the top slice of our platform, the data services. My background is as an electrical engineer. That's what I studied in college. And then actually I started getting interested in ocean buoys, of all things. I'm a surfer. I grew up in Hawaii, and tracking ocean buoys and the readings that were coming off of them for selfish reasons to understand when good surf might be headed my way. I developed an app called Buoy Alarm, which was triggering alerts based on the data that was being provided by buoys out there in the ocean. From there, a company that was founded by a few Estonians called Marine Explorer at the time, which turned into Planet OS. They found me. I joined that team in 2012. And at Planet OS, we were really focused on sort of looking at devices that were in the field, focused on gathering environmental data, so Earth observation data, and then that sort of transformed into providing data as a service from different Earth observation forecasts, National Weather Services. So it was really interesting, and we were focused on building that. Intertrust was a seed investor in Planet OS, so that was sort of our link to Intertrust. And about 5 years ago, we joined the Intertrust team and started working on the Intertrust platform and some of the data interoperability aspects of the platform. So that's sort of my path to Intertrust. And it's been really interesting to see that start from a single device, these buoys floating out in the world, and now, this much broader aspect of data interoperability, data security, trusted data sharing. So that's really the focus now with the Intertrust platform.
That's amazing. Chris, it never fails to amaze me how many people get into IoT from different fields, right? But I think you're the first surfer from Hawaii that got into IoT that way, right? So it's definitely a record. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Julian, how about yourself?
Well, first of all, Tom, thank you so much for having us on the podcast. This is really fun. I'm really looking forward to the conversation here. The discovery call was great. As for myself, just very briefly, I kind of consider myself a recovering engineer. I've been in the dark side of product management for a long time, but I cut my teeth on databases. When I graduated from engineering, I was recruited into the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, which seems like an odd place for a technical person to start. But I built databases for the refugee determination system, and that was a nationwide system. It won a competition, and it became the United Nations international system. It's called refworld.org, and it's still the place for decision makers in refugee field to go today.
Wow.
That took me to Nokia, of all things. It's a bit of a haphazard path, and I became their technical lead for content protection and digital rights management. We were fielding our very first music phone. I think it might have been one of the first music phones ever fielded, the Nokia 5510. And I was in Silicon Valley looking for a solution, found Intertrust, was forced to read their big a big book patent, they call it, the largest patent filing in U.S. history at the time, which basically described the incredible innovations around distributed trusted computing that Intertrust developed at the time. I selected Intertrust as the exclusive DRM for Nokia, and we launched, and that was a tremendous experience. Spent some years there, and then I was recruited by Qualcomm to lead their security efforts, and then security led to product responsibility for sensors, for biometrics, for GPS. And guess what? All those things together make up the IoT. We called it machine to machine back then. I was the founder of Qualcomm's machine to machine business group in 2005. And ever since then, I've been really passionate and thrilled about security and trust and end-to-end systems and cloud-based systems today, all the networks that feed into it of what we call the IoT today. And I've been working with vehicle OEMs and smart grids and home IoT and wearables and all that great stuff. So really looking forward to getting into an interesting chat today.
Well, thank you, guys. It's got quite interesting paths into Intertrust then, both of you. So one via an acquisition and one was a supplier for you many years ago, Julian, at Nokia, right? It's interesting how that's come about. It's quite interesting, just on the topic of Nokia. I hear that they're in IoT now. They're doing with satellites and space as one of their big growth areas. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. It's brilliant. There's, first there's satellite 5G now. So all of the incredible efficiencies and additional spectrum that's available in 5G has now made it possible to do it from full satellite coverage. So now you have IoT use cases where you have full global coverage.
Amazing. So to talk about Intertrust then, as a kind of boilerplate, what the business does, could you talk to me about that, Julian, for people who may not know of Intertrust, some of our listeners and viewers out there?
Sure. We're the leader in trusted distributed computing and interoperable data. Our focus has always been on data. We were originally and remain today the leader in multi-DRM systems and conditional access systems. Our Express Play products are hyperscaled with thousands of transactions per second. We've been doing this for decades. We've invented a lot of what's considered distributed trusted computing, and we built that into a new platform, really originating from the work that Chris Kalima's done with Planet OS, and really applying it over the last several years to the IoT, both consumer IoT and especially industrial IoT.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that was a common kind of bond that we had in our discovery call. I came from a world of video transmission, security, conditional access modules, etc. And of course, Intertrust kind of cut its teeth in that environment many years ago, right? And it's obviously still very prominent in that space. Exactly. But IoT is a real growth area for Intertrust, and in terms of interoperability, various solutions that you've got bringing to market. And Chris, this is something that you're very passionate about and do a lot within the business. Could you explain a bit more around that?
Yeah, so Julian sort of hinted at our heritage and protecting media assets. To us, they're all just bits, but being able to provide that interoperability into industries that are becoming increasingly digitized, increasingly data-driven is an area that we look to grow into. And as Julian mentioned, we are majority owned by energy companies, so we've been focused on a lot of the problems that exist with utilities within the smart grid, looking to provide trust and interoperability between all of these different devices that are being deployed in the field. This is a tremendous growth market. You're seeing smart meters go in, you're seeing EV adoption come along. We see a lot of opportunities for interoperability where you're going to need to manage these assets. These are essentially distributed energy resources, little drivable batteries that are moving around cities, parking at homes. This is all going to become part of our energy system. And optimizing that is a data problem. You're going to need to know where these devices are. You're going to need to know the state of these devices. You're going to need to send trusted commands to these devices in order to discharge or charge at the appropriate time. So we see this digital energy market as really ripe for some of the technology that Intertrust has developed over the last 30 years.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about EV there is really the kind of driving force that people are talking about when it comes to interoperability, because it's something that we're gearing up towards, to going fully electric as a global nation, right, all together, and so it has to work. The infrastructure is good, right? In North America, where you guys are based, it's good, but it's not great, and it needs to be great to get there. And I think these are some of the big challenges we face at the moment, right?
Well, especially the next generation use cases that have really become prominent. Homes represent more than 20% of the energy load on the grid and quite a bit more than 20% of carbon emissions. And we have to deal with both. We have to optimize both in every nation. It's actually a civilization concerning thing. And so there's a lot of waste in the homes. The way that electricity grids have been designed traditionally is really overbuild the system so that at peak times between 4 and 8 p.m. in any given city, there's enough energy for everyone to pull from the grid. But much of the rest of the time, it's wasted. And this is really interesting how EVs come into this, because they're a big battery. They're a big battery in the home. So you could do time of use types, time shifting of loads. So you could charge the EV in the off-peak hours when otherwise the energy would be wasted. And then at peak times, you can have that electricity from the EV battery go back into the house. Now, in terms of making it work functionally, it's not very, very difficult. It's a systems problem, right? But you need a trust model. You need to be able to be certain of the integrity and the authenticity of the data coming from the devices, to ensure that air conditioner's off, to ensure that thermostat is really at the right level, to ensure that the bits are properly coming off the EV and not coming from the grid. And two, you have many OEMs. You have industrial OEMs on one side of the meter. Inside the home, you have many different OEMs as well, many different data formats. And the data interoperability problem is a nightmare, which also, by the way, increases the threats and the attack surface because of the complexity. And so what we're bringing in is an end-to-end system, highly trusted, very secure, data interoperable, so that we can actually really make use of the data coming from these homes and sync it up and start really saving the energy that we can, reduce carbon emissions. And the virtual power plant, it's nothing without interoperable, trusted data. And that's what we're here to provide.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I love the phrase, and I'm sure you guys have heard it, that energy is never owned, it's borrowed, right? And we're borrowing it from one place, we're giving it to another, and it's this continual cycle of energy. And I 100% agree with you that we need to be more sustainable, and we need to make sure that it's trusted, it's secure, and that it's passed and authenticated in the right way. And it's great to hear some of the work that you guys are doing in that space, because it's needed, it's called for. And we need to do more around it. I want to talk, if I can, around a recent partnership with EIPGRID. I know we mentioned this in the discovery call. Could you talk about that partnership, what you've done, and who's best placed to answer that, Chris or Julian? Who wants to take it?
I can take a quick stab at it. Yeah. So EIPGRID is a Korean company. They're a leader in distributed energy management. And so what they look to do is actually provide optimal power management. So different business applications like demand response, they have control over energy storage assets at locations. They actually manufacture hardware for communicating and coordinating these different assets. And so they work with power aggregators that may have smaller numbers of these devices under their control. They're also deploying their own hardware so that they can manage some of these devices on their own. And they have artificial intelligence that works to orchestrate all of these assets to provide things like energy arbitrage. So, discharging a battery when it's economically advantageous for the owner and charging it overnight when energy is cheaper. So they can actually return on investment pretty quickly on some of these assets. So that's one of the business advantages that they present their customers. Now, Intertrust's role here is what Julian was alluding to, providing that trusted interoperability. They want to use some of our technology, specifically this explicit private networking service that we provide, which can ensure data that's traveling to and from these remote devices is trusted, has integrity, so we can sign data packages to make sure they haven't been tampered with, or you can detect when they've been tampered with. We can encrypt that data en route so that you have data privacy, even if it's traveling over untrusted networks. So, a lot of these solutions right now, they rely on things like virtual private networks, VPNs, and so it's a very difficult configuration problem. You need to make sure that all these networks are secure. It's easy to misconfigure. Data may touch a node in the network, or you may not have full control over it sometimes. So those untrusted networks really present this security risk and an attack surface for some of this data. And that's where XPN, explicit private networking, can help to protect those packets persistently, both in transit and at rest. So that's some of the technology that EIPGRID is looking to use with us. And that's one of the things we bring in this partnership to help them enable these virtual power plants that they're looking to build out.
Yeah, that's absolutely phenomenal. And I think, of course, it's no secret to anyone listening here that we're in one of the worst sort of energy crisis states we've ever been in, certainly across North America and the EU, prices are escalating tremendously and people are finding it really hard. So I think the best use around monitoring and using that energy in the kindest way is so critical right now. And it's great to hear about this collaboration that you've done with EIPGRID and something the company should be really proud of, right? So that's fantastic.
If I could double click on that, one of the things that we realized a few years ago when we started entering this industrial space is that the old ways of securing networks, the segmented architecture where there's no protection on the devices, no protection on the endpoints, these so-called air gaps just don't work. There's been thousands and thousands of attacks, most famously against Colonial Grid, because Colonial Grid, although it was a ransomware attack on their IT systems, didn't have enough trust in their air gap that this wouldn't go into their oil and gas pipeline and have the risk of blowing things up on the eastern seaboard of the United States. So the old way of doing things with this segmented architecture doesn't work. TLS, SSL for e-commerce has proven to be a great network security technology, but it's only a pipe and it terminates at hubs and gateways, leaving data and systems exposed. Also, VPNs are, as Chris said, hard to set up, hard to configure. When you move things around, you have to reconfigure. They leak. The iOS VPN still leaks even in its current version. So we realized we needed a better approach. And with the brilliance of our CTO, Dave Mayer, has invented much of what's called distributed trusted computing, much of what's called public key infrastructure for that matter. He was at Bell Labs, many other appointments as well. And he's invented a technology called explicit private networking that basically deconstructs these TLS and VPN to primitives to make it more of a message-based, IoT optimized for the tiniest devices that really applies to these zero trust network architectures that we all need to move to. And that's the really exciting thing about EIPGRID. They are incredible innovators. I can't believe the things they're doing. And we're helping them with this trusted interoperable data for VPPs, but different from what we were talking about in the home. This is industrial. Instead of an EV battery, it's a container. It's a 20-foot container that's a big battery, and they manage that as the flywheel to store. They do all sorts of amazing, crazy things, like electric vehicle infrastructure is hard to roll out in South Korea. So that they'll actually come and set a time, and they have an app for it to come with a vehicle with a big battery to charge your vehicle for you. They're doing all this incredible innovative thing all over the world, and we're really, really thrilled to be their partner to bring trusted data interoperability to their industrial use case.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, and I think sometimes you need thought leaders in this space, right? You speak about your CTO, incredible to be able to produce that and do that. But sometimes you need case studies like this and highlighting it on a podcast in order to inspire other folks to do something similar. Because I think you raise the tide and all boats come together. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
A quick word from today's episode sponsor, Kenza.io. Guys, I speak to a lot of organizations wanting to develop their own smart solutions, and the common barriers that keep cropping up is complexity. This is why I'm so behind Akenza.io. Using their no-code self-service platform, companies can build great IoT products with value cases, connecting, controlling, managing and securing IoT devices, all in one place at speed and scale. Their unbiased technology makes it possible to register any type of device via any connectivity technology, process the data and make it available to any application in the cloud. The platform is adapted to organizations of all sizes, from startup to enterprise, from one device to massive IoT deployments. Thanks to the self-service solution, you can start creating your IoT case right away, even without coding skills. Akenza.io are offering an exclusive 30-day free trial, so you can test the platform out for yourself. Check out the link in the description and start building your smart solution today. In terms of interoperability, this is an ongoing issue for IoT. It won't be the first nor the last time that I'll talk about this on the show. What is the ongoing issue in your eyes with IoT devices at scale and interoperability, and why is this such a recurring topic?
There's two levels, and I could speak to the security cryptographic elements of it. And the problem there is, and it's one of the things that XPN helps solve, is that you get these silos, I mentioned public key infrastructure earlier, basically cryptographic mechanisms for providing data integrity, authenticity, and sometimes secrecy, encryption as well. But the way it gets implemented is not just to protect against the very serious attacks out there, but often as a competitive edge, so that as an OEM, you keep from sharing your data, even with your customers, because of security and things like this. So you get all these siloed approaches, and it's really hard to get a one pane of glass view over your whole trust infrastructure, over your whole field of devices. And so that's at one fundamental level. The data can't even see each other, so you don't even get to the next stage. But the next stage is really important, and Chris is an expert in that, and it's how you name things properly. And well, I won't even go there because I've got myself in trouble. I hope, Chris, you can help us.
Well, yeah, I mean, so obviously getting that data to some type of data store is one challenge, and then common data formats, common data models, specifications around data. I get a temperature off a device. Is that in Celsius? Is that in Fahrenheit? Did you name that column T? Did you name that column temp? Are these the same? So business glossaries, common data models, these really speak towards the usability of that data at the end. So when you're a data consumer and you're looking to aggregate all of these different devices, how do I know that they are all speaking to me in the same language, right? And how do I unify that? And that's been, a big challenge in the semantic web, right? We were all going to unify around common models. I don't think that's really the case. Standards are definitely important, and we'll see them emerge, and I think they will help to consolidate certain areas of IoT and certain spaces within data. But they're gonna mix and commingle with all kinds of other things. So I think having the ability to translate these on the fly is going to be very, very important in the long term. So being able to transform that data, make it match a model or another model in order for different end user archetypes that need to consume this, whether it be a business analyst or it's a machine learning model that's orchestrating the VPP, or it's an application that's just displaying some of these things. There's a lot of uses for this data downstream, and that's really where interoperability. What we've seen in some of our work with the renewables is there's just a lot of fit for purpose systems, and particularly in larger generation companies, energy generation companies. A lot of those companies have been built up through acquisition. It isn't an ideal greenfield situation where you can sit back and design the ideal architecture and have the common data model from the get-go. You're looking at 5 or 6 different systems working with different OEMs, different devices in the field. They've all been deployed over the last 20 years. How do I bring these together? And that's a really big challenge for these companies as they're looking to manage these systems and you bring them together. And we've seen in the energy space over the last 10, 15 years, a move towards digitalization. So there's a lot more digital data now, but bringing that together has been a continuing problem. And that's an effort that we're helping to solve on this sort of top slice of the platform, our data services, providing that interoperability, mapping that data to common data models. So usability of that data, and then ultimately feeding it in a governed fashion to the different people that need to use it.
I think 100% agree. First and foremostly, people talk about standards, right? There was a lot of noise about Matter recently, right? And within the whole IoT world, standards are a common formality in order to move forward, because that's the problem that we've had and that the industry has had and has plagued it for such a long time. There's a couple of things I want to delve into a bit more there, and if we can. So standards, having 360 visibility, data sharing, governance, all of these things work together in order to try and fix some of the solutions that the problems that we have. Is there any to you guys that kind of stand out more as more important than one another's, or things that we should be focusing on first? Is it standards? Is it data collaboration, data sharing? What are your views on that?
Well, there's a lot of standards out there, and there's even a cliche to say there's so many you could just choose your own, and then that turns into its own silo, right? And I think we're at this very early stage, and there's de facto standards and de jure standards, and what tends to happen in industries to make things work and make things interoperable, there's an initial spark and innovation, and the industry comes around a standard and essentially makes it a somewhat de facto standard, and everything starts working together. And I get the sense we're at that stage. We do a lot of work with standardization, and that's one of the things that I think we're ready for now. We're ready for a data interoperability, of a standard for trusted data interoperability, because the two really have to go together. And I think when we achieve that trusted data interoperability standard, it's going to transform all of these markets, particularly these markets that deal with the intersection of energy, electric vehicles, and the home.
Yeah. And of course, recently we've had the emergence of the EU Data Act, right? What is your thoughts on the impact of this on different industries and what it might mean to companies?
Yeah, I think the EU Data Act is pretty interesting, and you can draw parallels with the EU Data Act with GDPR. So the EU has really been a pioneer, I think, in data regulation, data legislation, and the impacts of these laws that are being passed ripple through, because they touch all these multinational companies that need to adhere to them within the EU zone, but you'll see them propagate outwards. And so, the goal of the EU Data Act, it was the first draft was issued in February of 2022. The goal is now being revised and reviewed, and the aim is to have it come into effect in 2024. One of the main goals of it is to facilitate access and the use of data for consumers and businesses. It's really looking to unlock the data economy in a business-to-business setting. And so it wants to provide the development of interoperability standards, things that can be reused. And we think that this is really going to serve as a catalyst to enable some of these use cases that we see are currently blocked by some of the business relationships and the way that these businesses operate. I can raise an example with a renewables operator we work with. They purchase turbines from an OEM. They cannot get the SCADA data off of those turbines. That is not something that is included in the purchase of these assets, right? And that sounds ridiculous, but that's how it operates. And so as a result, they cannot use that data to perform their own maintenance, to sort of understand how their devices are working. They're sort of just locked in. They own the device. They look at it. It generates energy, and that's it. And the OEM is providing the maintenance contract. Now, with the EU Data Act, that will change. That data will need to be shared with the owner of that asset, which unlocks this economy for third-party vendors to provide potential maintenance contracts, come in and provide alternatives. You can provide predictive maintenance. You can look at the history of this asset over its lifetime and actually infer other things. You can look at it across your portfolio because you're dealing with 2 or 3 or 5 different OEMs. And so I think that's really going to be an interesting catalyst for bringing this. And again, I think it's going to see similar impacts like you saw with GDPR. GDPR here in the US, at least, it's sort of spawned lookalikes. Here in California, you have the California Consumer Protection Act. Massachusetts passed the law. We do not have a federal law for data subject rights similar to GDPR here in the US, but 16 states have passed their own legislation. So I think what you're going to see is this propagate elsewhere into the world, and it's going to create a data economy. And we're already seeing this in the EU with the formation of domain-specific or sector-specific groups that are focusing on these problems within their industry. So an example of this is Katina X, which is an automotive-focused group where they're looking to optimize the supply chain by bringing in the different vendors, the OEMs, to create a trusted environment for data sharing that they can build up these data economies. So it's taking the EU Data Act, it's applying it to different specific segments in different sectors, and I think you're just going to see continued growth there and this evolution of a data sharing culture.
Yeah,
it's going to run into some headwinds too, because all that Chris Kalima just talked about is multi-party data sharing. And typically the way it's done today to share multiple parties' data is an extract, transfer, load in some sort of data warehouse, a bunch of CSV files, and they lose all their governance. And the trouble with that, and I think what corporations and even individuals are going to feel concerned about is their sensitive data being exfiltrated or used in ways they don't want, in ways outside of the EU Data Act. And so that's one of the things that we really aim to get ahead of at Intertrust, is to have an environment in the cloud with really strict governance over the data mapped to permissions for identities coming into that environment. And I think that's going to be a necessary precursor to enable companies to feel comfortable about this. And it's very important because with the advent of machine learning and AIs today, we could do so much more with the data. And not just from one individual OEM. Imagine multiple data sets from multiple OEMs, multiple inputs, new insights that are garnered. And again, I'll go back to trusted data interoperability. If it's not trusted, you're going to see data poisoning and see machine learning and AI models do exactly the wrong things that we humans want them to. And without interoperability, you won't have the sense of what is what. And so also it won't make sense. So I think these three things together, to have a governed place, to have multi-party data interoperability, trusted data, is what's going to really let the EU Data Act take off.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing, right? So, being, I was going to say being an EU citizen, but I'm from the UK. Technically I am. I have an Irish passport, but when GDPR was announced, I have a staffing business as well, right? And you can imagine GDPR is a big thing for us. I actually felt it was a really good thing to cleanse your data, and good for the stakeholders, for the customers that we had, to make sure that the data was up to date and relevant and timely per the Data Protection Act that we have in the UK. And I think, if I may, I think the UK has actually been pretty good when it comes to data and the rights of data and the use of it. But I think it's a problem that we all need to try and solve and work with. And I think, something that you said, Chris, that struck a chord with me is I think we'll look back in 20, 25 years and think, wow, we didn't share that, or that wasn't collaborated, or that was just a spreadsheet dump of, and there was no governance. And we'll be shocked at how we kind of allowed this to happen for such a long time.
Right.
Yeah, we're just beginning to understand how to deal with these things, right? I mean, we all carry around a little device in our pockets that tracks us everywhere we go. That's completely new. Like that didn't exist. So the amount of data, the storage, these data volumes, the proliferation of devices, it is growing exponentially. And so I think we need to, policy is lagging. Legislation is not, technology is leading, and legislation is trying to keep up. I mean, I think cryptocurrency is a great example of that, right? We're still trying to figure out what the heck this means and put into place the legal guardrails to protect consumers against it. And I think that will always be the case. Technology will lead and legislation will follow. And it is. I think it's makes sense. And I agree. I think in a generation from now, the digital natives that I see that are doing things like my little nephew is buying digital goods. I have no need for digital goods in my life. I like physical goods. I like things I can touch, but this is very common for them, and they're very comfortable buying Roblox and Robux, and so they're I think you're going to just see this transformation, and it's coming, and it's new now, and it's uncomfortable because it's disrupting business as it's operated, right? It has economic impact for the leaders in these businesses, and they're going to have to adapt and adopt. And I think you're going to see this change, and it will be a powerful one.
We see the repercussions of this every single day. There's another data breach announced, another system compromised, more identity theft. The dark web is getting more and more organized in terms of their business organization and their tiers. They're run like Fortune 500 businesses now. And the Colonial Pipeline attack came as a ransomware as a service attack. They've actually figured out their business model. So they have a front-end negotiator and a technology provider, and they're different entities, and they work very effectively together. And so in order to reap the benefits of data, it really has to be trusted and interoperable.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've just started a course actually on OSINT, open source intelligence and software forensics. I've always been quite interested in it, and the amount of breadcrumbs and trails that are out there at the moment, it's just ridiculous when you look into it. You know, we must get better at this. We have a right to get better at this, and the consumers that are using our products and services is so important. But it's great to know that, you know, Intertrust as a business, and it's so top of mind. The way you guys talk about it, you're so passionate about it, you care about it, and you're prepared, and you know what it's gonna, you know where you're going and what you're gonna do with that. And I guess that would be my kind of last question on the future of data collaboration and sharing. How do you think it will evolve? You know, where do you think it will be in the next 10 years? A lot more robust, a lot more procedure around it?
Or a lot simpler. I think the incorporation of biometrics, it's begun already with our smartphones. And so that's a fundamental and very, very easy element of identification. Each human has some 250 biometrics. There's face, eyes, cornea, fingerprints, veins. Even the way you sit in a car is an identifying biometric. So the root of all this is identity, both for us humans as well as our machines and devices. And so identity is going to be much, much stronger, much, much more robust, and much, much easier. When I sit in the car, it'll authenticate me. I won't even need a key fob to enable my car to start when I press the start button, right? And everything flows from that. You know, I was just realizing too, the biggest data interoperability nightmare was the Viking lander crashed on Mars because they mixed up feet and meters, right? And I think that's another huge challenge that's going to be solved as well. And so all of this will catalyze and basically remove the friction to using data and data analytics and machine learning models. And I think we're going to hit another exponential curve. And then we're talking about like where's ML going to go, and predictive and prescriptive and prognostic analytics and all these automations around us, and done right with very, very important regulation like the EU Data Act, GDPR, and everything else. I see a really rosy future for humanity, much more efficient energy systems, transportation systems, and I'm an eternal optimist. I see a real utopia ahead of us in the next, especially 10 years.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic, and I hope that we can get there, and I hope that we get better at this and do the right thing by one another. In terms of Intertrust, then, so we've spoken a little bit about where data collaboration and data sharing is going to go. Any upcoming partnerships around distributed computing or partnerships that Intertrust are doing that you might want to talk about that our viewers and listeners could be interested in?
We got a bunch under the hood. I don't think we're in a position to share them right now. We were thrilled that EIPGRID came out in time for this. There's going to be a lot more coming, Tom.
Excellent. All right, fantastic. Well, guys, it's been absolutely great having you on the show. Honestly, it's so interesting and incredibly passionate guys. Talking about security and trust. It's really fantastic. We have a question actually from our audience, which I'm going to ask, and I'm going to read it verbatim. How does Intertrust technology support the growing trend of decentralized systems and blockchain technology? We touched on crypto just a little bit.
Yeah, Yeah, I'll just sort of jump in, and maybe Julian has something else to share as well. But one of the announcements that did come out, and this is more from our media side, so Intertrust still does have obviously express play and activity in the media space, but it's this market maker solution toolkit, which is allowing NFT creators to protect their content. One of the big problems that we see with things like NBA Top Shot, essentially digital trading cards of NBA highlights, those videos that you're purchasing, anyone can see them. Like, you can go to the website and download it and keep it, and really all you own is the right to sort of resell that asset later. That video is not protected. And so using Intertrust technology and some of the DRM work that we do, we can actually protect those assets so that you have the right to determine who can view these things, not just anyone on the internet who can go to the website and grab it. So adding that level of protection for content across NFTs, exploring some other smart contract-based business models, so things like fractional ownership, things like being able to resell those rights or rent rights to things. That's some work that the media side of Intertrust is working on. And for us, with regards to the energy space, we are looking at using that technology, this token rights management technology, which is the underlying service that's driving the market maker solution toolkit, to do things like an accounting layer for carbon credits, being able to facilitate transaction tracking across microgrids. So if you think about XPN being connected at the edge, we can authenticate those devices. We can use TRM to record these transactions in a blockchain to be able to create a common ledger that can be shared, used to reconcile accounts and different transactions. So that's one of the areas I think where Intertrust could potentially be moving with regards to our work in the energy space, and really tying together the XPN capabilities, the data interoperability, and then using that to record these transactions on a blockchain.
Fantastic.
There's also, our view is that distributed trusted ledgers specifically are great technology. The blockchains, they've really created some disruptive, innovative business models and things of that nature. And we use them. We see them as assertion ledgers that basically record what people can do and rights. And we're thrilled that now there's been an economy built around rights. It's what we've been about since our inception. It's also very ironic that many of the blockchains consume a lot of energy and they're being used in energy conservation applications. I don't fully get that, but I think that's part of the evolution path we're on. What I also think is that in order to have this data sharing, we need to start at the edge. And we need to allow service providers to see all of their networks under a single pane of glass. And that's what we've really targeted XPN to solve, is the ability to have this trusted data from the deep, deep edge right up to the cloud that can then plug into ERP systems in a way that one OEM's data is trusted in the same way as another, and then of course the data interoperability. So I think that's where it's going to go. Blockchains have their role, but it's going to continue to evolve around governance and interoperability.
Guys, it's absolutely fascinating, your views on this. You made me laugh, Chris. You spoke about hot shots on NBA. It's the only NFTs I own, actually, which is quite funny. And I keep getting emails about buying more of them. And,
yes.
But now maybe I can use your technology to make sure no one else can see them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you need DRM. They need DRM.
Absolutely. Yeah. Guys, really enjoyed the conversation today. Particularly great for me. I'm a big fan of this type of work in trust and security. Where can people find out more about Intertrust?
Intertrust.com.
Simplest and the easiest way.
Yeah, we're all through social media, but everything's on Intertrust.com.
All right, perfect. Chris Kalima, Julian Durand, thank you so much for your time today on the IoT podcast.
Thank you, Tom. It's been really
Appreciate it, Tom. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Before we go, I wanted to thank today's episode sponsor, Akenza.io. Don't forget to check out the link in the description and gain access to a 30-day free trial of their self-service platform. Thanks for tuning in to the IoT podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're on. See you next week for more IoT talks and tales.